for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, it is 5:32 on 27th. We will get going with a roll call.
Mr. Dedad?
Here.
Mr. DePlacido?
Here.
Mr. Olajeri?
Here.
Mr. Shaw?
Mr. Shaw?
Yes, here.
Ms. Shaw?
Here.
Mr. Wojtek?
Here.
Mr. Zona?
Here.
Mr. Enos?
Here.
Ms. Huff?
Here.
Mr. Kruger?
Here.
Ms. Shea?
Here.
Ms. Terry?
Here.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Okay, let the record show we have a quorum. All in attendance. Item number 4 on the agenda, public comments. Do we have any comments from the public who would like to address the commission? We see no comments from the public. Move on to item 5. Approval of minutes. Everybody, hopefully the commission members got a copy of the minutes. We went through those a few times. There's a few comments that I'll make about the minutes. But does anybody have any corrections? I know we had a last minute correction that spelling. We got that taken care of. Somebody had the spelling.
That's correct.
So for future minutes, Cheryl, I spoke with Cheryl and I spoke with John. The draft minutes are going to go to John and myself, along with Michael from our consultants. It just became kind of a nightmare, I think, for Cheryl having 7 or 11 people giving comments. John and I will review. We'll work together with any comments that we think are on it. We'll present then. Cheryl will present the draft minutes as part of the board packet, and then at the meeting, if there's any comments that the rest of the commission might have, that would be the time that we bring it up. Then we would once correct it, and we'll finalize it, and hopefully then approve. But it was just an administrative nightmare. Cheryl, I spoke probably 3 or 4 times on getting these things. We had about 4 or 5 different ones of us giving comments, and some were giving us comments on the same section, just different wording. It was, trust me, it was rough for me too, but for Cheryl. So we're going to do that, and then also the minutes will be signed by the secretary, Mr. Blasco, and the minutes we just approved last meeting, were signed by John. Prior to that, they had also signed, which I just think a little overkill. So we're gonna go with that. So do we have any comments on the minutes? If no comments, we have a motion to accept. Motion. Motion by Mr. Blasco, second by Mr. Dedad. Cheryl, you want to call roll?
Mr. Dedad?
Yes.
Mr. DePlacido?
Yes.
Mr. Olajeri?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Wojtek?
Yes.
Mr. Zona?
Yes.
Okay, item 6 on the agenda, approval of bills. Mr. Dedad, we have no bills to approve. No bills. We didn't spend any money, folks. Great. Thanks for your volunteers. I know there's been a lot of hours spent, there's been no money spent, so thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go on to item number 7. New business public partners, Millcreek Township, I think, we have it later on. It's towards here. Number 10? Okay. So, new business public partner presentation of townships of the second class current form of government committees of the whole. I think I'm going to turn this over to Michael. And Michael, I guess if you stand at the thing, make sure you turn your microphone on. And for those of us here, we should turn our microphones off. Unless we have questions.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn the microphone on.
Is that on? Is his microphone?
You should already be on.
Is the
It should be on. Yeah.
It's not.
But none of the audio is on.
None of it?
No. And it was all working like 10 minutes ago. I just checked everything.
The switch is on.
Yeah, the switch is
Switch here. It's a direct plug here.
Anybody over the know? Turn it on.
She's checking. She's the expert on this. She said it was working 10 minutes ago, so.
Hang tight, we're looking on trying to get the microphone.
Okay, they do.
No, because his microphone, but I have no audio coming through here. And I don't think we could hear it through
They
there.
were working on this.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Because everything's on and everything's connected to mine.
Did they hear us? I just got a text that there's no sound at all.
Yeah, we're having issues here too.
Mm. Should we continue?
Okay, let's start.
Try that one. See if that one.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now? Sounds like an AT&T.
Is there a switch on there?
Oh, this mic is on.
Okay, Jim brings up, before we proceed, Jim brings up a good point that if they're not having any sound, should we be proceeding? If they're not getting any sound on the,
There's no sound.
sit tight, Bill.
Okay, we'll do.
And this is the.
Over here to there.
I think, my experience would be that the meeting was open, the live streaming and being able to view it remotely it's an extra benefit, right? I don't know if we would have to cancel the meeting if they can't hear it.
No.
I know that's not really good, but
The minutes will be published.
yeah.
Test.
It's not the best way to carry it on, but
Anything here?
No, I triple checked all of that when I went over there and nothing disturbed. The audio is just gone. Because even if I was hearing audio here, we would still get audio from the speakers.
Okay.
The speakers are.
Record this mic as
Yeah,
well.
there's something wrong. And I don't know what is wrong, but something wrong with the
The system.
Even though it's not broadcasting audio,
Are the commission
With the
members
recorded version?
working?
We don't have audio from these speakers at all either, so we don't have any audio.
yeah, you're welcome to give it a shot. We're still holding on still for, see if we get some audio before we proceed. If we don't get it, we're going to proceed anyway. We're trying to make it better for people on the live stream.
She's just the ready one. Well, this is the, usually I just.
That's okay. See what she Thank you, Jim.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait, hold on, the thing is turned on. Okay, these ones are working again.
Working.
Working again, and then
Try that, Michael.
try that one.
Test.
Okay. All right, victory. Thank you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen.
We're going to get going. Hopefully you can presentation from Michael.
They're all working.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. There we go. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your technical expertise.
Let the record show that none from the vote so all right, we're going to turn the floor over to Michael. Have a word, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight about second-class townships in the current form of government you have here in Millcreek Township. And before you, you should have a handout that basically says Millcreek Government Study Commission, the second-class township code, current form of government, committee of the whole presentation, summary presentation. I'm not going to literally go through each bullet of this presentation. I'm going to summarize it because I really want to talk in a broader context about townships and local government in Pennsylvania. With respect to the township code, it probably is one of the oldest codes in Pennsylvania with regard to a series of provisions in it that outline powers and duties and responsibilities and give this Board of Supervisors authority to carry out their charge of providing governance of the municipality. And I'm going to talk about the characteristics of the Board of Supervisors as well. And I'll throw a little comparison and contrasting in as well with other municipal codes. With regard to local government in Pennsylvania, the General Assembly has adopted a principle known as Dillon's Rule, but that's secondary to the fact that the General Assembly creates local governments. They're creatures of the state, and they can create and they can repeal. But the point I want to make is, under this concept of Dillon's Rule, which really was a judge out of Iowa in the 18th century, that wrote on the powers of local government. It basically says that local governments can only exercise those powers that are expressly stated in law, or that are fairly implied with regard to what the local government is trying to achieve or accomplish. So what does that mean? The powers and the duties and the responsibilities of the function of a Board of Supervisors, as outlined in the second-class township code, are the ones that can be exercised with regard to the governance of the municipality and the role of the supervisors. For example, you need two second-class townships and two Millcreek as well. Is the role of the supervisors to not only act as a legislative body, to pass ordinances, resolutions, and motions, and to enter into agreements, contracts, and to incur debt, and to purchase goods and services as a legislative body. Under the arrangement where supervisors may be employed as employees of the township, they also act in an executive capacity to implement the policies and the regulations and the ordinances that are adopted by the same governing body with respect to the role that each takes on within being a working supervisor as an employee of the township and what their respective responsibilities are. So to just be direct with the explanation, you have a governing body that not only legislates, but they implement the actions that they take, as well as get involved in the administrative implementation, because they are working supervisors and can oversee certain departments where the budget that was adopted or a contract that was entered into or a code enforcement ordinance or the like has been adopted, and they oversee its implementation. So these are blended rules that the supervisors play with regard to the second-class township code giving them authority to undertake these kinds of actions. Now, within that context, the Board of Supervisors is a policy-making body. The other elected party in the township is a tax collector. They have one role, and that's collecting real estate taxes and any other taxes that the governing body delegates to the real estate tax collector who is elected. They may also collect assessments that are levied against specific property owners for improvements that are made to those properties that are not available in the entire township. In addition, you have another group of elected officials called the Board of Auditors. And In this case, with Millcreek, they don't necessarily conduct the annual audit. But their role also is to set compensation for the working supervisors that become employees of the township, that the supervisors vote to elect themselves and the other two to, again, an employee capacity. And in the township code, it talks about the criteria or the basis upon which the elected auditors will determine compensation. And that's really based upon what's paid in the locality of the geographic area that a township is part of or located in for similar services or identical services. Based upon, again, what the job description is, the size of the budget for the respective department, how many employees they have, and also, again, what is key is what is paid in the locality of the general geographic area. And the elected auditors have the ability to set not only wages, but a compensation package that may include overtime for the working supervisors. It could be paid holidays, paid vacation, sick leave, bereavement leave, those types of paid time off benefits that may be available. And again, that's really up to the elected auditors to state that. And they meet the Tuesday after the organization meeting, which is the first Monday for the Board of Supervisors in January, every year. And in setting that compensation, they take official action. They have a chair, they have a secretary. They vote relative to the compensation that's being offered, not only the wages. And that becomes part of their record. Just as the Board of Supervisors meet, minutes are taken, it becomes part of their official record to memorialize their actions, just as the commission has the minutes taken. And those become the record of the official actions that Cheryl takes at the duties that we just adopted the January 13th meeting. So what does all this mean? In terms of a governing body, with respect to the highlights of this handout, there's certain criteria that must be in place that's required in order for anyone to run for public office, whether it's this township, other townships, boroughs, cities, and the like. And in stating so, you first have to, for a township, you have to be a registered voter, an elector. You have to live in the township for at least a year before you run for office. And you have to continuously maintain residence in the township that you're serving. So, these are a given. These basically are all in all of the municipal codes. The supervisor serves 6-year terms. The auditor, 6-year terms. The tax collector, a 4-year term. Now, in going through this, at times, there's vacancies that are created not only on the Board of Supervisors, maybe, but the tax collector resigns or moves out of the town, or one of the elected auditors. That's one role that the Board of Supervisors take on, filling vacancies. And the code really spells out a procedure under which vacancies are filled. Now, generally speaking, they've got 45 days to fill a vacancy. Once a letter is submitted and it's accepted by a roll call vote at a public meeting. If the supervisors don't act within 45 days, then it's deemed that the resignation is accepted, unless the person who's resigning rescinds their resignation before the Board of Supervisors take that action. If the Board of Supervisors cannot fill the vacancy within 30 days, it goes to a vacancy board, which is made up of the Board of Supervisors, plus one registered voter who is appointed at the organization meeting, and that individual becomes the chairperson of that vacancy board. They have 15 days to act to fill the vacancy. If they're unable to act because it's a 4-member board, assuming that there's not a vacancy on the Board of Supervisors, which would make it 2 supervisors plus the vacancy board chair, making 3, that you may end up with a tie vote of 2-2 on appointing somebody. If that's the case and they can't be resolved with one of the members voting the other way, a yes rather than a no, it goes to common pleas court for a judge to fill the vacancy. So these are procedures that are spelled out so that you technically don't have gridlock with regards to filling vacancies and the like. Now, with regard to what you took when you came on board as a commission member, so do supervisors, tax collectors, elected auditors, and certain officials. They all have to take an oath of office, swearing to uphold the U.S., Pennsylvania Constitution, and the laws of the township, etc. Also to protect the municipality with regard to the faithful performance of the duties. Certain people have to be bonded. And that bonding, again, is for anyone who handles money, signs checks, has access to assets, so to speak. Now, part of the role of the governing body, the supervisors, stated in the township code is they have to meet monthly. They meet and they have to vote. Those are two requirements of being an elected official, whether it's here or a borough or a township. Now, just in fact, the second-class township code is the only code, regardless of population and square miles, that allow an elected official to become an employee of the township. The only other exception is where a borough of less than 3,000 people, a council member may act as an employee if the borough council sets a policy, adopts a policy, allowing that to happen, giving permission. Yes?
Can you repeat that? Is it the second class that only has that?
The second-class township is the only code, regardless of the population and the square miles, that allows an elected supervisor to also become an employee of the township.
So first class.
The same township.
First class would be.
The first-class township does not allow that, nor does the city code, like the city of Erie, so to speak. Even though they operate under an optional plan, that still is not a permissible option like it is in a second-class township code. And again, with the boroughs, you have to have a population of 3,000 or less in order for a council member to become an employee. But just as in the township, the Board of Supervisors need to have a policy set that they may be employed as employees. Not be redundant, employed as an employee, so to speak. Just as it would be in boroughs, but we're not focused on boroughs. I'm just using that as a contrast and comparison.
So they can use the next one.
So two things that the Board of Supervisors have to do is meet and vote. That's required of their position. They meet monthly. They have to have a quorum, just like the commission does. And the voting is normally by a roll call vote, with minutes being taken. And in the Sunshine Law, it spells out the minimum content of what the minutes should include. Basically, it talks about those members that are present at the meeting, officials, the elected ones, the appointed ones, the date, time, and place of the meeting, the roll call votes of the members present, how they voted. And in most cases, it is a roll call vote, unless it's like a consent agenda item, where it would just be yeas or nays to accept the consent agenda, or to really just correspondence and those kinds of formal items, informal items. And it's also persons that appear before the board, their name, and the subject or content of their testimony. Minutes do not have to be a verbatim transcript of the proceeding. It just has to contain, at a minimum, those items that I listed. It can't go into greater detail. But again, it's not a court proceeding like a zoning hearing board, or you're in court in a trial where the court stenographer is literally recording every word. Minutes do not have to reflect that. But the point I'm making is that minutes are a memorialization of the actions taken by a governing body. Just as your minutes as a commission, you're also memorializing the actions that you've taken as well. Now, what's important about that is that we, public partners, mainly me, we're going to be writing a final report, which is required in the Home Rule Charter and Optional Plans law. A final report that basically takes into account all the proceedings and all the actions that the commission has taken, the committees, the meetings that you've had with people, whether it's here or off-site. and reduce it to a report that is consistent with the requirements that is spelled out in the Home Rule Charter Optional Plans Law that have to include certain items within a final report. That final report goes to the county election office no less than 60 days before the election, which would be coming up in November, if the commission votes to advance a specific optional plan of government. Because your decision may be that you want no change. That's a choice that you as a commission will make. Solely the commission. So, let's talk a little bit about the duties of the supervisors, as outlined in the Township Code. For example, general governments of the township. Yes, makes sense. And then again, executing legislative, executive, and administrative powers that again, they adopt, then they implement. Maintenance of equipment and facilities. Because when townships were formed 200-300 years ago, based upon King Charles giving a charter to William Penn for what is now all of Pennsylvania, to go out and populate what is now Commonwealth of Pennsylvania into municipalities, into counties and municipalities within the counties. And the second-class township is the basic municipality that exists within Pennsylvania. You start the list of municipalities. However, specific codes, first-class township code, talks about if you want to become a first-class township from a second-class, you have to have at least 300 persons per square mile in order to qualify. Then you have to put it on a referendum. If you want to be a borough from a second-class township or a first-class township, basically you have to have the court, the common pleas court, approve that you can support yourself through the economic conditions that exist in that proposed newly formed borough. With regard to cities are usually formed out of boroughs, or they could be from second-class townships to a city. But again, if you wanted to do that today, that requires a referendum, voter approval. But second-class townships, it all starts here in a second-class township. And a lot of townships have remained the same. For example, in my handy-dandy DCD local government fact sheet, well, I apologize, but the point I want to make is that, there it is, thank you. So in this local government fact sheet, there's 2,559 local governments today as we sit here. 1,454 are second-class townships. That is 57% of the total amount. Yes, right now, as we sit here, there are 2,559 local governments in Pennsylvania. Cities, boroughs, first-class and second-class townships. 2,559.
Does that include authorities? Or is that number?
No, it does not include authorities. It are just municipalities.
Okay.
Cities, boroughs, the two types of townships. And the town of Bloomsburg, which was incorporated by the General Assembly to be called a town, which is part of the borough code. 2,559 total. Of that total, 1,454 are second-class townships. You rule in terms of the number of municipalities in Pennsylvania, 57%. I just wanted to throw that statistic out there because it's noteworthy. It's remarkable. Continuing on in the summarization of my handout. With regard to the duties of supervisors, in addition to what I just said, they employ people to carry out the necessary services and necessary functions that the Board of Supervisors takes on as is all part of the administrative apparatus or the administrative departments. And they set compensation for the employees, unless you're with a union where it's through a collective bargaining process, the organization of the various departments based upon an organizational chart, and also which people are going to supervise the employees. Also, the supervisors have to make sure their records are kept of all persons employed for federal, state, local withholding taxes, as well as for Department of Labor and Industry data for number of employees and new hires, as well as for pension purposes, and also the dates on which work was done, the number of hours, with compensation paid to each person, and the capacity in which they're employed. I know this is kind of nuts and bolts stuff, but I just want to make the point that you're running a municipal corporation here. That's what municipalities are called, municipal corporations, in the public sector. Unlike the private sector, where they're incorporated entities with different statuses attached to them. Now, as part of the organization, not only do you have the supervisors, which are really the policy-making decision makers, you also have an appointed treasurer. And that person in the code has specific duties and responsibilities as well, which is to receive the money, to record the money, to keep distinct and accurate records, to pay out monies to vendors and contractors upon authorization of the Board of Supervisors. And in doing so, the treasurer, by signing a check, is basically saying the township has enough money in its coffers to meet that liability or that obligation. That's part of what a treasurer's signature signifies. Also, the treasurer has to preserve account books, ledgers, journals, those types of documents, making deposits in the name of the township. Now also, the township code provides for a township manager. The Board of Supervisors may employ a manager. Yes?
Before we leave that, is there any requirement for an independent audit?
Good question, thank you. The supervisors have the discretion to have a CPA audit done by adopting a resolution and advertising such prior to the appointment of the auditor, which would set aside, or maybe even using a stronger word, which would displace the Board of Elected Auditors from conducting an annual audit. Most townships the size of Millcreek utilize CPAs or a CPA firm to conduct an audit, to do an independent auditor's report, which has notes to the financial statements. It follows certain standards, known as the Government Accounting Standards Board, with regard to certain reporting and management discussion analysis and the like, putting a value on the assets of the municipality. Something much more detailed than what an elected auditor would do. Now, elected auditors are normally responsible to fill out the Department of Community and Economic Development annual financial report. That's mainly what they do. But CPA folks, they take it a step further and do an independent auditor's report. However, DCD, in my 34 years, and I'm married now with DCD, they only require a DCD form known as the annual audit report. So it's really at the discretion of the governing body whether you want to ramp it up to a CPA audit. Good question, John. So as I mentioned, townships may employ a manager. They have the authority in the township code. And they would create, they meaning the supervisors, they would create the position by ordinance. They may, after it's created, or other boards come in, they may abolish the position for whatever reason, whatever the dynamic is, justifiably or not. They may decide they don't want a manager anymore. The manager, the secretary, the treasurer, they're at-will employees. They serve at the pleasure of the appointing power, which is the governing body. That is from the Pennsylvania Constitution, dealing with civil officers. that the appointing power may remove that individual because, again, they have at-will status. The powers and the duties, you will not see them enumerated in the second-class township code. They would be enumerated in the ordinance that the Township Board of Supervisors adopts with respect to the powers and duties and responsibilities of the manager vis-a-vis the Board of Supervisors. And this would be under a second-class township code environment. We're not talking about home rule or optional plans that I'll be making a presentation on regarding optional plans in February. It's just strictly what I'll call a pure second-class township. That, again, the duties and responsibilities are enumerated in the ordinance. Now, ordinances, just by generic definition, are really local laws, and they sometimes can have enforcement provisions or mechanisms. Now, one provision that may, if the parties come to a meeting of the minds, meaning the manager and the board, there may be a provision in there that deals with severance, should the manager be let go without cause, which is sometimes defined in the agreement. In the Township Code, there is an article that's known as corporate powers. Now, as I referenced a few minutes ago, municipalities in Pennsylvania are municipal corporations. So townships like boroughs and cities have corporate powers. Let me just spell out a few. One is basically the sale of real property to the highest bidder, the sale of personal property to the highest bidder. And the Township Code under corporate powers spells out a procedure or conditions under which that takes place. Even though there's a separate statute called the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act, the Township Code in the corporate powers section allows for intergovernmental cooperation for Community A to provide services to Community B, whether it be police, fire, public works, code enforcement, parks and recreation, and the like, under an intermunicipal agreement that spells out what the parties do, how you deal with insurance, where you store things, or what job descriptions are for the people that do the jobs, etc. Also under corporate powers, the township may create, and I believe Millcreek has one, a capital reserve fund, which is to put money away for future needs that normally are for assets that have a multi-year useful life, known as capital assets. An operating reserve fund is also authorized in the corporate powers section. That is really a set-aside from the general fund or otherwise that allows the supervisors to have money set aside for emergencies, contingencies, to mitigate or avoid a tax increase, or to say for some rainy day that you may want to utilize that money when some need comes up. That's, again, part of the general fund rather than a capital reserve fund. Also, there's a separate statute called the Local Government Unit Debt Act. But in this corporate powers section, it allows the board to incur indebtedness. It also allows the board to carry out its land use regulations. But that's technically under the municipality's planning code. Or building and housing regulations, which is normally under the Uniform Construction Code or otherwise. And the regulation of businesses, which is basically requiring licenses and permits for vendors that do transient visitations or for solicitation to homes, etc. It's basically regulating the conduct of businesses. Now, in trying to bring this all together, each code, including the Township Code, deals with contracts and purchasing. Now, each year, the Department of Labor and Industry, the PA department, they set a bidding threshold, a sealed competitive bidding threshold, based upon the rate of inflation from the prior year. And that's normally set in October for the upcoming year. And just for your information, for 2025, sealed competitive bidding thresholds is $23,800. I know that number is just a number, but that's the number that if the township wanted to go out and do some projects that was at or over that amount. They would have to use so competitive bidding with regard to roads or vehicles or equipment or construction of something, so to speak. And they'd have to go with advertising of bids and award it to the lowest responsible bidder. Now also, if it's between $12,900 and $23,799, the township may do what is called written or telephonic bids. And that's basically seeking price quotes from at least 3 vendors. And then they basically select the most responsible and qualified bidder. Then they have to keep records on file for 3 years. There are exceptions to still competitive bidding, which may deal with professional services, where the workers do the work, but the materials and supplies have to be bid out. Or you may deal with a sole source product that only one manufacturer offers. So those are exceptions to bidding, so to speak. The Township Code, along with the other codes, it's basically setting out rules of how to operate and regulations of how to operate and conduct business, and setting parameters under which the board functions. Now, one last item that I want to cover before I summarize everything is taxation and finance. It's another chapter or article in the Township Code. And really, the taxation and finance article is really the grease that moves the wheels of government. Without finances, local governments can't operate. Without adequate financing, whether it's the operating budget or the capital budget. Every year a budget has to be developed and adopted by the governing body. There's a 20-day public inspection period where the public can literally come in and look at the preliminary budget before its final adoption. And the board, before final adoption, has the discretion to amend the budget up or down based upon its will, or holding a public hearing on the budget and receiving input and feedback from the public that they would take into account to change the numbers, so to speak. Then the budget's finally adopted by December 31. Now, in a municipal election year, such as 2025, the Board of Supervisors that sit in January of 2026 at their organization meeting, or one thereafter, have the option of reopening the budget that was adopted in 2025 by December 31, to revisit the appropriations and to also revisit the millage rate. If that's the case, if the increase in the budget is of a certain percentage or amount, it would have to be re-advertised. And the key is that any changes that take place have to be authorized and adopted by February 15th in order to meet that time frame to make changes to the budget. It's in the code that the Township Board may make supplemental appropriations after March 31st. Let me rephrase. They may make supplemental appropriations from funds that are on hand or estimated to be received within the fiscal year. It's transferring unencumbered funds as of April 1. So for the first 3 months, they cannot transfer unencumbered monies. Also, there's provisions in the Township Code that deal with investment of public monies. Bottom line is, they have to be investments that guarantee the principal amount with some rate of return, whatever that may be. And it has to be FDIC insured or some related government or nonprofit entity. Rates of taxation. Second-class Township Code puts a cap of 14 mills for general purposes. Looking at your tax rates for 2025, your general purpose millage rate is 3.3977. 3.3977 mills for general purposes. For administration, for police, for fire, code enforcement, parks and rec, so to speak. 3.3977 mills. Then you get into what's called special purpose levies that are authorized in the code that the supervisors may incorporate. They deal with street lighting or the procurement of land and construction of buildings, purchasing and maintaining fire apparatus. And my understanding is, looking at the DCD website, The township has a special purpose levy of 0.8 mils for fire equipment and firehouses that is specifically dedicated to fire equipment and firehouses, fire training, and the like. There's also a permanent improvement fund that the township has, where the mills is 0.406 mils. The total millage rate for Millcreek is 4.6037. That's low. That's good. You have a very, we township, you have a very wide, expansive, somewhat growing tax base that provides and supports the services that are being offered. There's also special purpose levies for fire hydrants or park and recreation facilities. There's no limit for park and recreation facilities. There's no limit to pay off principal and interest, because you have to guarantee to the bondholders or to the financial institutions that you will have the wherewithal and not be capped at a certain millage to pay off debt. There's also special levies for ambulance, rescue, and other emergency services. So this is a summary overview of the code under which the township currently operates. And again, I wanted to give you some baseline information and to give you a frame of reference for when the commission, we, consultants, public, will hear a presentation on the optional plans of government. But also to give you some insight and frame of reference for when the interviews for the Board of Supervisors takes place as well, probably in the month of February. So I'll be happy to field some questions, or if you have comments or want me to clarify something, I'd be happy to do that.
I just want to advise the commission, if you do have questions, please use the microphone, turn it on.
Thanks, Michael. That was very informative. I was wondering if you could add in some historical context. I don't know how long old Millcreek is. I know it's 100. 18. Yeah, there you go. So some historical context of when this, in many townships were created, and what maybe their primary purpose was then, and how have you seen them morph into other areas? I know we had a discussion. You said one of the main things townships did was to support the roads.
Correct.
So I wonder if you could give this group some historical context of second-class townships and what they primarily did or what they were kind of created for in the beginning.
Good question. Historically, 200-300 years ago, townships, again, were the basic form of government in Pennsylvania. And they provided services to the inhabitants thereof, so to speak, which mainly dealt with roads, allowing people to free flow, transportation free flow for the transport of persons, goods, and services, to conduct commerce, to earn a living, to bring their goods to market, so to speak. Because a lot of the activity that went along with townships building, maintaining, repairing roads was the agrarian, rural nature of townships with regard to farming and, again, getting these products that they had produced to market. And as the population grew through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania developing, so went these townships that some went into a first-class township, the village of a second-class township that was the center of commerce. A lot of times, people that lived in that area, rather than the farmers, they felt as though that they weren't getting the services that they felt that they deserved based upon the taxes they were paying. So a lot of those people went out and created boroughs, their own incorporated municipality with their own tax base and their own governing body and setting their own policies. Sometimes cities were created, like the city of Erie. Townships have also grown through migration, whether it's people from cities or boroughs moving into a township because there could be more open space. There could be more available land for development, for building homes, for businesses. Generically speaking, townships offer a lower millage rate than, say, more built-up urban areas where there's more concentrated populations of people. Now, a lot of the townships, the 1,454, they vary in size from less than 100 people to, Millcreek with 54,000 plus, and Ben Salem, 62,000. Thank you, Toby. And that list, I think, is part of your handout packet that Sue Weber put together. Yeah, 62 in Bucks County out toward Philadelphia. So they have chosen to stay second-class townships because there's no mandate that you go, if you reach a certain population threshold, that you have to become a first-class township or a borough or a city. However, these larger populated townships, they have almost become, by being full-service municipalities, they almost have become like cities, so to speak. But they've maintained their designation as second-class townships because it maintains the character and the flavor and the brand of that municipality. And they like the code under which they are operating. Some have maybe gone home rule. Some have stayed second-class township. Some may have gone optional plan. Those are the choices that municipalities have in Pennsylvania.
If I may give you a break for 1 second, just an observation. Takes a second. Just an observation from the handout. We have about the 25 most populous second-class townships in PA. There are 3 that have gone home rule, I'm seeing. And 1 that's, this is more of a form of observation, but it's entitled form of government. But there's 1 that has 3 paid employees. That's where we are today.
So, Toby, I could also add, since you brought that up, you're talking about this document, and I didn't realize what the source was, but if it's something we're going to be referring to, it's also missing a county, or a township, Northampton, in Bucks County.
Northampton County?
No, Northampton Township in Bucks County. It should be in between Hempfield and Falls. So it's up there in size. But it also has the same form of government as Millcreek, I believe.
Okay. Thanks.
Or no, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what. But they have a township manager, so I don't know the specifics of it.
So too, thank you. So to wrap up, yes, please.
My question was, I'd like to know the role of a general authority in the township government structure. And is it customary to, if you form a general authority, to appoint the 3 supervisors to appoint themselves as a quorum on the authority with 2 additional members? And do they have to operate under certain laws, or does that kind of loosen their discretion for passing things and spending versus just the regular second code?
A general authority is created by a municipality by adhering to the Municipalities Authority Act. It's a separate statute from the Township City Borough Code. Again, the Municipality Authorities Act. It's a separate statute adopted by the General Assembly. And in that statute, it allows for a general authority to be created by the municipality or municipalities. The governing body that creates the authority appoints board members that serve staggered terms. Normally it's a 5-member authority board that is created to literally govern and oversee the operation of the general authority. Now, when you use the term general authority, that means it can take in various types of activities such as water, sewer, stormwater. It can even be an economic development type activities. It could be an ambulance authority per se. that term general authority allows the municipality to wrap in other activities or various activities. So, and the governing body has the ability to appoint authority board members. I'm not totally sure whether the governing body can appoint more than 2 if it's a 5-member authority board, because appointing 3 would be a quorum that technically maybe a board could control the votes and the outcome of that 5-member authority board with 3 members of that. Well, again, they're all appointed by the governing body, but in terms of members of the governing body sitting on the authority board, I'm not sure that there's more than 2 permitted from the governing body on a 5-member authority board. And just as minutes are taken at the Board of Supervisors meeting, this meeting, the authority operates under those formal requirements as well. They can hire people, they levy user charges that pay for the services that are offered. They can incur debt and repay it by self-supporting debt, which is the user charges. So that's how they operate in terms of a separate statute.
Mr. Chairman, Jim, back to your point. I double checked. I wasn't looking at my phone to see what score basketball games. Don't believe in that. It's terrible. People do that in church or at meetings. Northampton's population is 10,400, so they didn't make the list. This is the most populous.
I was really careful, and I said, I'm going to defend myself. I was really careful. It took me a long time to try.
So I went to the DCED website today, actually, and Northampton, Bucks County, Northampton Township in Bucks County, it says it has 39,915.
Okay, so I just all I keyed in was Northampton.
They're a second-class township, and what I do know is that they have 3 supervisors and a township manager. I don't know if those supervisors are employees or not employees.
Yeah, the one I looked up, I'm reading a little further. It says it's safe for families and kids, and it's in Lehigh, in the Lehigh Valley, which would not be Bucks County. Okay.
There are municipalities that share the same name with other municipalities in different counties.
And we should put it on the list if it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very good job.
Question, Art?
Yes. Art at the floor.
Green is go. Mike, it says here, and I believe you said it, is it correct to make the statement that our status quo, our supervisors, function as a legislative body and an executive body? Is that a correct statement?
That's correct. In a pure township, second-class township environment, that's correct, yes.
That would not be the case in the Home Rule Charter, correct?
If the Home Rule Charter so states that there's a division of roles and responsibilities between the elected supervisors and maybe a manager, there would be a firewall of what duties are performed by which party.
Excuse me one second. Correct. No, please. Because, there's a sense of formality now when you have a speaker here, and I don't mean to be too informal, but there's something that, this is also a work session in a way too. But your comment, your response was that first your question was the supervisors are acting as a legislative body. No question at all. But when they're acting as an employee, that's when they're individually acting in an executive capacity, if they're, for example, called a municipal administrator or something like that.
When they execute the policies that they've adopted in an administrative capacity, then that's a dual rule.
But there are 3 people as a board, but one individually as an executive?
Yes.
Okay. So they're not an executive board?
Correct.
Okay.
They do function in an executive
capacity on an individual basis. And you're doing that here. Each of the supervisors has an administrative, municipal administrator title, and then have a job description as to what they do.
On this list of second-class townships, where we have a manager and 5 supervisors, in that scenario, the supervisors would function as perhaps a council, and there would be a separation of powers there? Or not?
Yes.
Yes.
And to add to that real quick, a board of supervisors would have the choice whether or not they want to be employed as employees or not. So you could have a pure second-class township where the board employs a manager and the supervisors are strictly a decision and policy-making body. That's all. They don't extend their role to be employees of the township.
Thank you.
Some exist like that, some don't.
One more question. Why is it, in your opinion, that out of the 2,559 local government municipalities, more than half of them are second-class townships? What's the reason? Why are there so many? Is it the size?
Well, I think it's simply because every municipality in Pennsylvania started as a second-class township. That's the basic form of government. And then there were cases where a second class wanted to become a first class based upon 300 persons per square mile, or they wanted to become a borough, or the boroughs collectively wanted to become a city. But it all starts with the second class township classification.
Good answer.
And some broke off of a larger township and carved up a bigger township and made it smaller townships. Ohio Township, next to McCandless, where I'm from, likes to brag about, "You were once us."
Thank you.
You know, and at one time, it could be conceivable that Millcreek Township included what is now the city of Erie. I'm just saying hypothetically, just as an example. I'm not saying it's true, that's what happened, but just as an example, it could be of a larger whole that the city was created by certain designated boundaries that left Millcreek with the square mileage that it has now.
So does that happen? Do townships or boroughs or cities ever merge? I know we have probably, Pennsylvania is one of the most, has the highest government bodies.
One of them do.
Right, and we've got Northeast Borough and Northeast Township.
The highest,
Yeah.
There are some mergers and consolidations going on now. My experience has been that there are numerally smaller boroughs and townships that are combining, that are what I call combining boundaries. Usually the smaller ones, because they maybe have less complex systems to work out, to blend into one bigger unit.
Mike, just for clarification, for example, if you have a manager and 5 non-employee supervisors, the supervisors then cannot hire themselves as employees. If you go into...
Only to the extent that they don't have a policy that would allow them, that would allow the supervisors to appoint each other as a working employee. See, if you're just a pure second-class township, the Board of Supervisors make a decision to become employees or to not become employees and just be a decision and a policy maker and leaving the implementation or the execution of the laws and regulations that the board passes to a manager type to implement the policies and decisions. It varies depending on each township.
So you can't go into something and say you can't, for example, or you can't. You're saying it's part of the existing policy when they form?
Yes, it's part of the organic township code that permits, doesn't require, but permits Board of Supervisors to appoint themselves to become employees of the township.
So in this particular, in what you mentioned here, there could be a manager and there could be 5 paid supervisors.
Correct. There could be.
But I think that's what the distinction is made, that they're non-employees.
They're choosing, like Cranberry, they have a manager, and the Board of Supervisors have chosen not to become employees of Cranberry Township. They're strictly policy and decision makers.
Thank you.
Michael, can you talk about the townships, but can you tell us more about the manager role? When you look at this list, you see almost everyone as a manager. Can you tell us what skill set, what they bring to the table, why so many of the larger second-class townships have seemed to go in that direction, what the benefit or what the manager brings increase into a...
I'll let Toby talk, because he's been a manager for many years, and I may chime in and add something to it if you want to.
You know, I kind of hesitate to answer in an offhand way, because at some point when we get to that in this process, I would like to. I won't be quite like Michael, but he does. Everybody has their own style. But I think I have documents in my file and life experiences and so forth. So to summarize it in short form, it almost, I hate to say it this way, but almost would do it an injustice as to just to say just a quick thing. If you want, so it doesn't sound like I'm copying out. Life has gotten complicated. Township business has gotten complicated, and so has in all municipalities. And expectations of residents during my 40 years as a manager got to be greater, and it just people expected more, and so you try to give more. Just to point out, one aspect of being a manager is to know where to look, know where to get answers, know where to find out, have colleagues. I have a handout for you when the time comes when we focus on what good is a manager, what's the value of having a manager. We'll do that some evening here during our process. But we have there's a you can look it up online, the ICMA, International City and County Management Association. The cities and counties just fall under one C, ICMA, to keep it simple. ICMA is our association. It's a professional association. We have a program. I didn't want to get fancy, but I became a credential manager some years ago. And ICMA is a credential manager program. I wouldn't say it's as sophisticated as getting an engineer's license or a CPA, but it's the city manager's version of that level of professionalism. And we have a creed. Basically, there's 12 or 13 tenets. I have it here something on my pile there for future reference. The ICMA Code of Ethics, that if you don't follow it, somebody reports you. There's your there's a tribunal, and you're in or you can defend yourself or you're out, and you cannot have that credential anymore. You can't be a member anymore. And that very quickly, city manager form. I'll kind of get into what I would tell you in a couple of weeks, but anybody remember the term? I was a history mind. Boss Tweed. Sure. Boss Tweed was one of the guys that ran New York. He had his people that were going to support him. Then he handed out jobs, and he just did all kinds of things that just, after a long time, started making people queasy. And it spread into Virginia, toward the south. And the folks in Virginia said, wait a minute, we want to have good governments, local governments. We helped spawn the national government in the colonies. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, etc. So, in a city called Stanton, it's spelled with the U, Staunton. It looks like Staunton. They like it pronounced Stanton. It's down by the Cabins? Luray Cabins. Just past Luray Cabins, there's Stanton, Virginia. Woodrow Wilson was born. But in 1912, the folks they hired a person, an engineer, who they said, we want you to give us coordination of the council, the city council of Stanton. So we want you to coordinate things. We need somebody to help to run the affairs of this organization. We want it done purely, ethically, and with common sense and pragmatism. And so I'm starting to give you the answer, RJ. And so 1912, and that started to spread in Virginia, North Carolina, and now there's 13,000 of us, 24 countries, Israel, Great Britain, Germany, all through Europe, and Australia, New Zealand, that have city managers or township managers, and we follow a code, and we are trained. Not every city manager has an MPA, administration. I was political science. I had a liberal arts degree at Penn State, but I managed to take anything. I took some engineering courses. I took everything I could so I could be as good a generalist, because when I took my local government class as a junior, Professor Johnson, it was as dry as dust when he spoke. But he just lit my fire. And I can tell you the story when it's my turn to actually give you more details about what happened inside, why it's a vocation. That's pretty much it. Pretty much.
We're going to learn more about managers when we start talking about the optional plans of government with respect to that being a position within the optional plans with regard to instituting that type of role. So, RJ, your question is a good segue to discuss that matter when we get into optional plans. So just stay tuned.
Any other questions for Michael? Doug?
Yep.
Paul, I'm sorry, Paul.
The state allows the supervisors to become employees.
Correct. The state allows that in the township code.
What were they thinking? If a township decides to go to a manager form of government with 3 supervisors as just a council, do they still have the option of becoming employees? Or can it be stated when they create this government that those cannot be, they cannot take that option, they have to be just paid a stipend for going to meetings and such, but they cannot have the option of becoming employees?
Well, I'll answer it this way. Usually when townships employ a manager, the supervisors want to take a step back and just be policy and decision makers. They don't want to necessarily get directly involved in the day-to-day running of the operation.
When you have, 2 second delay. When there's a manager in a community, as there are many in Pennsylvania now, it's not a one-person act, because it's my job description in the Home Rule Charter. McCandless was a second-class township, and up until 1957, I think it was, became first class. And then when students' home rule got popular around the state, about 50 or 60 popped home rule right away. There's about 100 now. But the Home Rule Charter of McCandless has a good description of what the manager is. And the first words are that some managers are considered chief administrative officers, and some managers are chief executive officers. There's kind of a nuance there. I was clearly told to be the chief executive officer. And my governing body for 35 and a half years at McCandless said, we want to take care of the passing laws, approving developments, doing all the things that are these duties, some of which Michael enumerated. You take care of running the operation. And it was very specific in the charter, and a few things that weren't there emanated in ordinances later on. But that also meant professionalism into the departments and so forth. And you have a lot of departments here, and there's one example. Your treasurer, her title is executive, is it?
Director.
Executive director.
Director of Administration.
Director of Administration, thank you. And Melanie Page, the requirement for her to hold that job was to have a degree in finance, accounting, or some related field, and or an MPA or MBA. So that's a sign of professionalism there in that position. Same for me in McCandless, and hundreds and thousands of managers around the country.
And that's typically an appointed or hire. It's not a correct position, correct?
Correct, absolutely correct.
And again, they serve at the pleasure of the governing body. They're at will.
At will.
So this is a related question to the non-employee versus employee supervisor related to compensation. And Michael, I just want a clarification. I think I know the answer, but in here you say Millcreek Township supervisors are at the maximum annual compensation for elected supervisors based on population. But that's if they're non-employees. But they chose to be employees, so now their compensation is set by the auditors.
That's correct, and I just want to clarify that based upon the population of Millcreek Township, the second-class township code prescribes an annual salary up to and not exceeding a certain amount of money. I think it's 83 something. I wrote it down here. It wasn't in the handout, but it was, I wrote it, I handwrote it. Again, it's based on $8,385 based upon a population of 54,073. That's the maximum annual compensation for being an elected supervisor.
Right.
Plus whatever the elected auditors set as compensation for the employees that are also elected as supervisors.
So it's plus in addition to what the supervisors.
If you got a job, you get the job salary plus
Right.
$8,000.
The $8,385 is a maximum salary based on population to serve as an elected supervisor only. The compensation for being an employee is different.
So
It's set by the elected auditors. Yes, they can collect.
I do want to clarify for Millcreek Township purposes, Millcreek has not adopted a salary ordinance for meeting pay. So right now, we do not receive that $8,300.
Are they on a meeting?
No, they do not have any per meeting salary. They do not adopt a salary ordinance. They only receive compensation as employees.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So, yeah, I just want to make sure that we're clear.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you, Michael.
I just want to ask.
Oh, wait, we have a question from me.
Next presentation, what's the last name?
Michael Foreman.
Michael?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Foreman, thank you.
S-O-R-E-M-A-N.
That's not very last name.
Yeah. Okay, and Michael and Toby are part of the consultants that we hired at the previous meeting.
Public
partners to guide us through this process. Okay, we have, I'm sorry.
Don't you have questions?
That was my question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that one.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 8, committee reports. I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Degad for the budget committee.
Thanks, Paul. Actually, there's nothing from the budget committee to report this time because we're going to present the budget later on in the agenda. Other than to say that the budget committee did meet and create a budget that we'll be talking about later.
Thank you. Nice and short, sweet. Next on the agenda, we have the local government structure. Mr. Placido.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, the committee met on January 23rd, and it was a great meeting, actually. We were guided through some of the tasks of our committee, by Jerry and Jody and Rick. Jerry Andrew, for those who know. Jerry Andrew. And so we have a good handle on our
He was literally talking behind your back.
Please have us so we have a good understanding of that, and had a great meeting, like I said. And as a result of that, we have made some at least preliminary plans to go to downstate here, Cranberry. Thank you. On let's see. And it's tentative. I think it's February 18th. Yeah. So we're going to be going down there as many people as can make it and talk to their people down there. We have 2 other townships that we may be getting a hold of and at least talking to them on how they do it. Get some more information.
There's actually 3 other townships that we'll be talking to, 2 of which operate now under optional plan of government.
Yeah, Hempfield and Upper Kanji.
Well, the ones that actually operate under an optional plan of government is Indiana Township in Allegheny County and College Township in Center County.
So that's our plan. We have another meeting scheduled for February 3rd. And thank Marcia for taking that. As the secretary. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John or Jim before we move forward? If not, we will go to the last committee is the public outreach, public relations, public education, and promotions. Anybody have a report for that?
I do.
Yes.
As chairman, Arnold Jerry was elected chairman, and Donna Shaw was elected vice chairman. We have two very capable IT people, and Kim Huff and Doug Kruger, who volunteered, were appointed to work with our IT. We had John Fleming from Millcreek Township here tonight, and he has told us that our commission can be part of the Millcreek Township page website at no cost to us, a savings. We will continue to have a Better Millcreek page for the amount of $79 a month, and there'll be a link from that page to the Millcreek Township website, and it will be very easily accessible for Millcreek residents to click on the Government Study Commission. I believe it's going to be Government Study, Gov Study. And I'll repeat that there is no cost to us. In addition to that, and Kim and Doug will be handling those responsibilities. In addition to that, we have an able-bodied Sue Weber, who was appointed, volunteered to be our secretary to memorialize and take notes on what has transpired at our committee meeting.
We're making committees great again.
And we will be working on down the road on the vehicles to disseminate information to Millcreek Township residents from February through November when it's on the ballot. And we're really brainstorming on the best vehicles, and we will be having a meeting in 2 weeks to discuss that and begin the planning for that. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Art. I think we'll go on to the next agenda item, number 9, committees of the whole. I guess we're talking about doing some interviews with the township folks here in the Board of Supervisors, as well as the optional plans of government having a presentation. Now, I think on our agenda, we're showing that we're looking at February 10th to have the interviews with the supervisors, and the 24th being the time for the presentation on the optional plans of government. I would like to, and I spoke with Toby and Michael briefly. I'd like to recommend we change that. I have some thoughts that maybe it'd be better for us as a commission to know about those optional forms before we have those interviews. Toby, I think you wanted to be present. He can't make the 10th. And so I thought, just from an informational perspective, it'd be better for us to have that information before we actually interview the township supervisors. So even though we're showing the 10th and the 24th, I'm just suggesting that we flip those and go to the 24th for the interview with the supervisors, and the 10th for the presentation, which would be our next meeting, the presentation on the optional plans of government. I think, based on the question we had today, I think it's really appropriate we have that background before we conduct the interviews. I think it might change some of the questions we might have if we have that background. So I'm just going to throw that out there. We don't need any action on that. This was all just preliminary, I believe. We haven't had anything set in stone for these. They weren't agenda items.
And you, Mr. Chairman, are determining when the supervisors, you're going to communicate with the supervisors at whatever date it's going to work.
Yeah, right. A lot of them depend on whether they can make it on the 24th or not, but I think that that gives them actually a little bit more time too to maybe put up the calendar. They can come here on the 24th. So if everybody's okay with that, we'll just flip-flop those committees with the whole activities.
to show those two date changes. Any comments or questions, anyone?
And that does give the Structures Committee, we just had a report from John about, they're going to hear about these optional plans.
Right.
So whenever you go out in the field for the 3 folks that are going to be at Cranberry, plus Cranberry did agree to have 2 of their supervisors and their manager there talk about how that works. So you're actually going to get a grand slam. You're going to have a 4-bagger there. And so this will, the action, the information you get on the 10th will pay dividends for you on the 18th.
I think that's so important to have that, to have those questions, relative questions that are going to help us make a decision down the road. This is our one chance to ask somebody who's been through it, how they did it, why they did it, or whatever it was. And I think we have to have the right questions in our pocket to say, okay, and the question should help us make a decision. Now, I mean, get information, but how are you going to make a call? How are you going to make a decision? You need to think about it ahead of time and get the right questions.
In those 4 interviews, basically your master's degree after he gives you the intro course on the 10th.
So, John, I think John's pointing out that works out better for this committee as well. So, I think that's a good change. So we'll, Cheryl, so you know that we'll have that. I don't know if it'll just be part of the agenda you guys put together. There's a special action taken. Okay, we'll move on to item 10, the approval of the government study budget. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Jim to do that.
Thank you, Paul. As I mentioned earlier, the budget committee met and along with Toby from Public Partners, and we discussed budget line items, and then we did some homework, got some additional information, and shared that via email so that we could fine-tune the numbers and come up with this proposed budget that we have in front of us today. And for the benefit of others who don't have this in front of them, it's a very simple budget, so I'll go over each one of these. But I will say that the township has budgeted in their 2025 budget $100,000 for our use. And so we, as we put this budget together, stayed within that budgeted amount. And so we have professional services, which we've already contracted with Public Partners for that, and that's $70,360. Then under advertising and public communications, the legal notice is $600, and public outreach and educational materials $16,015, which by way of doing the math, because it looks odd when we say $15 there, that was the amount we made to get us to $100,000. This is probably going to be one of the larger budget items outside of Public Partners, and because there's a lot of education and outreach that needs to take place. Art spoke earlier and mentioned that his committee is already putting together some ideas, and as far as how to stay in communication with everybody as we go through this process, that's going to cost some money that will come out of this $16,015, as well as if and when the time comes that we make a proposal, put a ballot question out there, then there would be a lot of education involved there too that would cost. Travel, we set aside $1,000, as you heard earlier. There is a trip to Cranberry Township planned. So just to ensure that if anybody is taking mileage reimbursement, that we have some set aside for that. And then we have administrative expenses. Previously approved by the commission was the recording secretary services, set aside $7,500 for that. Keep in mind that all of these, that this budget runs through November 2025. Duplication and printing, 150. The live stream meetings, which we're doing, is $3,375. And then we have, for incidental expenses and miscellaneous expense category 1,000. That brings us up to 100,000. So I would like at this point to ask for a motion to approve the budget as presented.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any questions for Jim?
Comment, if I may,
Go ahead.
from the floor. With the $70,360 is a max.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed number, and so
Thank you.
just to make sure that's clear, and it includes travel money, so money for our headquarters operation, Allegheny League to run their payroll. So
No, thank you, Tony. I meant to say something along that lines in that, as any budget goes, we may have over budgeted in some categories and under budgeted in others. So when the dust settles, we hope to be less than 100,000.
Toby's giving us the friends and family discount. You guys giving us the friends and family discount?
So it's good to have a motion and a second on the floor. Before we take a vote, I just want to let the people that are voting on it, we did establish in the budget committee a 1 cent per mile reimbursement of this thing. If anybody wants to charge mileage, you have to budget. Anyway, any other questions or comments on the budget? If not, Cheryl, can you take the call?
Mr. Dedad?
Yes.
Mr. Placido?
Yes.
Mr. Olajeri?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Bill?
Yeah, those are.
Ms. Shaw?
He's the approved, yeah, he's the
Mr. Wojtek?
Yes.
And Mr. Zona?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jim. On to other business. Anybody have any other business they'd like to bring up today? Bill, any other business?
No, I'm fine. I'm going to review on YouTube, but I could hear most of it, but not all of it.
Okay. Very good. Then we'll move on to item 12, our second opportunity for public comment. Sue?
I just want to say that I went online and did something real quick, and I'll fix this chart and I'll reissue it to you because between Hatfield and Falls belongs Northampton, Jimmy, right? Its population is 39,900.
Excuse me, so we've got a lot of information. When it comes to the voting, do you mind? We get this out there for the public.
Too bad my husband's not here and admitting I was wrong about something.
Okay, on your chart, I'm going to give everybody a new chart. I'll make it tomorrow.
this is the 25 years population.
Right. Between Hempfield and Falls belongs Northampton. Jim, you are practice in Bucks County. The population of it is 39,915. It has 5 supervisors and a manager. And I'll find out, it's a second-class township, I'll find out tomorrow from the assistant to the manager if they are paid employees, and so I'll redo the chart over.
Great, thanks, Sue. That's very, by the way, that chart Sue, Ms. Weber put together has been very helpful as we proceeded here. That comes in handy a lot. Any other public comments? Anybody wishing to address the commission from the public? If not, anything for the good of the order? I think we already did the good of the order. If nothing, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.